Nathaniel Benjamin Levi Bar-Jonah, born David Paul Brown, was a pedophilic, hebephilic serial rapist, abductor, and attempted murderer. He was also believed by many to have been a serial killer and a cannibal, or projected cannibal. Background: Bar-Jonah was born as David Paul Brown in the city of Worcester, Massachusetts, on February 15, 1957. Starting at the age of 6, he would pick at his scabs until his skin festered, then proceed to suck on the blood from the wound. His mother was called multiple times from the school to tell her that this habit was upsetting both the children and teachers. 1 year later, in late July 1964, Bar-Jonah invited a 5-year-old neighbor girl to his basement, claiming that he had an Ouija board that could predict the future. Once inside, he attempted to strangle her until her screams alerted Bar-Jonah's mother, and she rescued her. But Bar-Jonah apparently got off with little to no punishment. At the age of 13, he lured another 6-year-old boy from the neighborhood to a hill outside, claiming that he wanted to go sledding with him. Once they got to the secluded hill, Bar-Jonah raped him. During his senior year of high school, Bar-Jonah impersonated as a police officer for the first time and abducted 8-year-old Richard O'Connor while he was on his way to school, raping and strangling him inside his car. A neighbor observed the abduction and assault from a window and called the police. Officers rescued O'Connor when he was unconscious and almost dead. Bar-Jonah was arrested and sentenced to an unknown number of months of probation. Just a few days before his graduation, as well as the conclusion of his sentence, Bar-Jonah drove to Hartford, Connecticut, and impersonated as a police officer again. This time, he abducted a 9-year-old girl and proceeded to rape her in his car, but he threw her out soon afterward when she started to convulse and vomit. A witness got the license plate of his car, and Bar-Jonah was arrested for the new incident. However, the report on this arrest never got back to Brown's probation officer, and he was released from probation in May 1976 with a letter thanking him for his cooperation. On September 24, 1977, Bar-Jonah impersonated as an FBI agent and abducted 2 boys coming out of a movie theater. He drove them to a secluded area where they were handcuffed. Bar-Jonah, who weighed 375 pounds at the time, left one of the boys in the car's trunk while he took the other away and simultaneously tried to strangle and suffocate him with his weight until he thought he had killed him. The boy actually pretended to be dead and was able to maintain the act even when Bar-Jonah started blowing cigarette ashes on his face. When Bar-Jonah left, the boy ran away and reported him to the police. Brown was arrested again, and the other boy was rescued. This time, Bar-Jonah was convicted of attempted murder and sentenced to between 18 and 22 years in prison. However, he was transferred to Bridgewater State Hospital, where he told psychiatrists repeatedly about having sexual fantasies involving murder, torture, dissection, and cannibalism. While he was still interned, on March 22, 1984, he changed his legal name to his present one, alternatively claiming that he wanted to honor his Jewish heritage, or that he wanted to know what it was like being a discriminated Jew. Bar-Jonah was released from the hospital in July 1991. A month later, he saw a 7-year-old boy sitting inside a car outside a post office in Oxford, Massachusetts. Bar-Jonah entered the vehicle and sat over the boy, but fled after other civilians saw him. Bar-Jonah's description was recognized by one of the police officers who had arrested him 15 years before, and he was arrested again. Bar-Jonah claimed that he entered the car to get out of the rain and that he intended to wait for the driver to return and ask him to take him home. As for the boy, he said that he did not know he was there, so any possible injury was accidental. However, he later admitted that his intent to kill the boy. For this, Bar-Jonah was given 2 years of probation under the condition that he move with his mother to Great Falls, Montana, and never return to Massachusetts ever again. In Great Falls, Bar-Jonah started collecting toys and memorabilia, mostly Star Wars related, and organizing yard sales that drew massive crowds of children. His first brush with the law in Montana was in December 1993, when he was accused of molestation by an 8-year-old boy who he was babysitting. Bar-Jonah defended himself by stating that if he had done that in reality, he would have killed the boy. The case was dropped after his lawyer claimed his right to a speedy trial had been violated. Montana crimes, arrest and death. On February 10, 1996, 10-year-old Zach Ramsey disappeared on his way to school. Witnesses saw an off-white vehicle almost running Ramsey over, and later recounted that he was crying and appeared to be followed by an obese man around the time he disappeared. Detective Bill Belushi, who investigated the December 1993 case, was assigned to investigate Ramsey's disappearance. Though he was provided with a list of registered sex offenders living in the area by the FBI, Belushi discarded it and centered his suspicion on Bar-Jonah, who wasn't registered. After an unsuccessful police attempt to enter the home shared by Bar-Jonah and his mother, Belushi solicited a search warrant of the property, but he was turned down. He later found that Bar-Jonah had access to his mother's off-white Toyota Corolla that he had the day off, and that he was seen standing in an alley just before Ramsey entered it. Bar-Jonah was also wearing a dark blue jacket that day, similar to that of a police officer's, was in constant close proximity of Ramsey, and had mentioned Ramsey's name to an acquaintance a few days before he disappeared. Belushi unsuccessfully solicited a new search warrant. Sometime later, Bar-Jonah moved out of his mother's house. On December 13, 1999, Bar-Jonah was seen outside an elementary school for the third time in a few days. He was wearing a dark blue jacket and a knit cap, and was carrying 2 cans of pepper spray and a toy gun and badge. Despite the doubts of their colleagues, Belushi and the Attorney General charged Bar-Jonah with impersonating as an officer and carrying a concealed weapon. A judge approved a search warrant for impersonation objects in both Bar-Jonah's mother's house and his new address. Police found 2 coats, one dark blue and another with a toy badge in the pocket, a second toy badge, a stun gun, and a baseball cap reading Security Enforcement. During the search, they also found a pulley on the ceiling of Bar-Jonah's kitchen, 2 albums with cutouts of children, and 2 documents about bondage and autoerotic asphyxia. 2 days later, Belushi was granted a second search warrant for any documents and photographic material. Besides the albums, they also found several lists of boy names later identified as boys from Bar-Jonah's youth in Massachusetts, including 3 that he molested. One also had an entry for Zachary Ramsey next to the word died. 3,500 photographs of children, multiple news clippings about Ramsey's disappearance, and undeveloped film containing sexual images of Bar-Jonah and 3 unidentified boys were also recovered. In addition, police discovered a book written in code which was cracked and revealed to be a cookbook with recipes such as Little Boy Pot Pie, French Fried Kid, and Little Boy Stew. Finally, police found a large, stained section of plywood in Bar-Jonah's garage, which was scrubbed with bleach and also struck several times with a meat cleaver as if it had been used as a cutting board. A luminol test in the same room revealed that the word Tita had once been written on the floor. This was tentatively linked to James Tita, a 15-year-old boy who was found raped and strangled in Rindge, New Hampshire in 1973. Further inquiries seemed to confirm the officers' fears that Bar-Jonah had killed and cooked Ramsey and possibly other children. It was learned that in the days after Ramsey's disappearance, Bar-Jonah held cookouts for his neighbors, in which he served deer burgers that tasted strange, once saying that he had hunted, killed, butchered, and wrapped the meat personally. However, Bar-Jonah did not own a gun or a hunting license, and credit card records suggested that he stopped buying food for a month after Ramsey disappeared. A former roommate of Bar-Jonah had seen a pair of bloody gloves and soiled boys' clothing matching Ramsey's at Bar-Jonah's apartment. Bar-Jonah had also surprised people several times by bringing up Ramsey, including one time when he said that Ramsey would never be found because he had been chopped up and the parts scattered in different places. Finally, hair that resembled a human's was found inside Bar-Jonah's meat grinder, and an excavation at a former residence uncovered 21 bone fragments belonging to a boy between 8 and 13 years old. The house's pipes could not be examined because the neighbors who moved in afterward had changed them due to constantly being clogged. DNA from the hair and bones belonged to 2 different African-American males, neither of whom was Ramsey. Ramsey's mother later refused to believe that her son was dead or that Bar-Jonah was in any way related to his disappearance. A psychic convinced her that Ramsey was living in Italy. She threatened to defend Bar-Jonah if he was brought to trial for her son's murder. Eventually, the charges related to Ramsey's disappearance were dropped, and the police focused on other possible victims. 2 names in a list belonged to 2 boys who lived in the same apartment building as Bar-Jonah and who were in his photographic film. One of the boys confirmed that Bar-Jonah invited them to a sleepover and then molested them, but the other boy visited Bar-Jonah in jail and wrote to him, saying that he was his friend and that he never harmed him. Nevertheless, he was charged with sexual assault, aggravated kidnapping, and assault with a deadly weapon in relation to practicing erotic asphyxia with one of the boys in the kitchen's pulley. He was convicted and sentenced in 2002 to 130 years in prison without possibility of parole. On April 13, 2008, Bar-Jonah was found dead in his cell from a heart attack related to his obesity. 3 years later, Ramsey's father had him declared legally dead over the opposition of his mother. Modus Operandi. Bar-Jonah targeted children between 5 and 15 years old. In most of his confirmed crimes, he drove a white car, dressed in navy blue coats, jackets and caps, and carried toy guns and badges so he could impersonate a police officer. After getting the victims in his car, he would drive over to a secluded place, restrain them, and sometimes rape them. Afterward, he would try to kill them by strangulation or otherwise suffocate them using his own weight. Known victims: Worcester, Massachusetts, July 1964, an unnamed 5-year-old girl, strangled, survived. January 1970, an unnamed 6-year-old boy, raped only. Unspecified date, 2 unnamed boys, intended, both escaped. July 26, 1973, Tolland, Connecticut, Janice Catherine Pocket, 7, possibly, disappeared, was never found. August 23, 1973, Revere, Massachusetts, disappeared. James Teeter, 15, possibly, raped and strangled. His body was found 2 days later in Ridge, New Hampshire. Unspecified date in 1974, Woodstock, Connecticut, Mary Petroni, 10, abducted and raped, was released. March 1975, Worcester, Massachusetts, Richard O'Connor, 8, abducted, raped, and non-fatally strangled, was rescued. Hartford, Connecticut, an unnamed 9-year-old girl, abducted and raped, was released. September 24, 1977, Shrewsbury, Massachusetts. 2 unnamed boys, both abducted, burned with a cigarette, and non-fatally strangled. An unnamed boy left for dead after sitting on top of him. He escaped. August 9, 1991, Oxford, Massachusetts. An unnamed 7-year-old boy attempted to kill by sitting on top of him. Great Falls, Montana, December 1993. An unnamed 8-year-old boy, molested only. February 6, 1996, Zachary Xerxes Zach Ramsey, 10 possibly, disappeared, was declared legally dead in 2011. Unspecified dates in 1999, the apartment sexual assaults, all molested. One was also partially hanged from the kitchen's pulley. His unnamed 14-year-old neighbor, the unnamed neighbor's cousin, a third unnamed boy. October 10th, 1997, Gillette, Wyoming. Amanda Dawn Gallion, 14, possibly, disappeared, was never found. Note, Bar-Jonah is also believed to have committed murders in Montana because of the findings made in his residences. He was also investigated for possible crimes in Alberta and Saskatchewan, Canada, where he lived at times during the 1990s, but the police found no links between him and any unsolved crimes.